Welcome to the Gifts of Glory podcast, where we celebrate and promote men and women of God that use their talents, gifts, passions, and desires to honor and glorify our God. And all that we do with Gifts of Glory, from our improv teams, well-versed comedy, and matrimony, to Pure Fest, to my own personal teaching, coaching, acting, and speaking, it's all done with the hashtag OGHG, Our Gifts, His Glory. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm your host, Dave Ebert, and we've got a great story for you here today. Our guest is Rob Decker, founder of Kingdom F.I.T. That's Faith in Training, Kingdom F.I.T. And he has this amazing testimony. He's been telling his story all over the world, which is actually God's story. And he's even been featured on CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network. And I don't want to spoil anything. I want you to hear his story in his own words. And I believe you'll be blessed by it. But first, before we get to the interview with Rob Decker, it's almost time for Pure Fest. September 28th is right around the corner. But we want to give the folks in Chicagoland a great taste of Pure Fest. And that's happening next Friday night, August 16th. And we're really looking forward to Comedy Night at CPC, held at my home church, Cross Point Church, also the home of Pure Fest, coming up September 28th again. But Friday, August 16th, Comedy Night at CPC is going to feature two fun comedy teams, Matrimony, which is my wife Bobby and I, performing some short-form improv together, and then the team Well-Versed Comedy will take the stage. It's going to be clean fun for the whole family. Tickets are available on Eventbrite, and you can find them by searching Comedy Night at CPC, or go to comedynight.purefest.org. Comedy Night, one word, comedynight.purefest.org. And here's a big bonus for you. If you make the suggested donation to come to Comedy Night at CPC, which is just $15, we're also going to give you a ticket to attend Pure Fest in September. If you have any questions, email me, dave@purefest.org, dave@purefest.org for more information. And Comedy Night at CPC, again, 7:30 p.m., Friday, August 16th, Cross Point Church in Lockport, Illinois. And now let's get to our interview with the incredible Rob Decker. Find out more about him at robdeckerspeaks.com. And Rob Decker's next, right here on the Gifts of Glory podcast. Welcome back to the Gifts of Glory podcast. I'm Dave Ebert, and I'm now joined remotely by a man with an incredible story of faith, of survival, and of God just working incredible miracles. His name is Rob Decker. You can find out more after the podcast at robdeckerspeaks.com. But before I rant too long and go on too long, I want to bring him on. Rob, welcome to the podcast.
What's up, my man? How are you?
I'm doing well, and it's a pleasure to get to speak to you. We've chatted back and forth a few times through social media, but now actually getting to hear a voice and kind of really connect in a better way other than social media. It's a pleasure and it's an honor to have you on.
Well, thank you, and thank you for taking this time to connect with me and to share my story. I really appreciate it, man. It means a lot to me.
Absolutely, and to just kind of give everyone an idea. Right now, you're working on building a fitness ministry. Tell us
Correct.
First about your current ministry and what it looks like and what you kind of hope to get out of it.
So I just recently created a gym out of my house called Kingdom F.I.T, and the F.I.T stands for Faith in Training. So for me, where Kingdom F.I.T comes from is, I'm going to have to tell my story at this point. So
sure.
So for me, 11, 12 years ago, it was 2007, I attempted suicide. I jumped headfirst out of a window. I tried to kill myself by breaking my neck by jumping out of this window. And I ended up hitting an awning, and it changed my fall. And I shattered my left arm, broke my right wrist, collapsed my lung, and I broke my back. And I was told, by the doctors that I was never going to walk again. And, the Lord showed up in the hospital and he spoke some really powerful stuff over me. The story is much deeper, but I'll talk more about the Kingdom F.I.T part of it. And so my whole process in healing, so there was a connection between my faith, which I was very new at. So before I jumped out of the window, I was roughly 2 months from accepting the Lord into my life. And, shortly after I jumped back into the world, got into worldly things, got myself into a situation and attempted suicide. And fitness had always been a part of my life. And what I found through my process of building up my body again, I was also building up my relationship with God, or building up my spirit. And so they kind of ran hand in hand for a long time. And I remember God, speaking to me and telling me that I was going to go out into this world and I was going to heal people through fitness. And I'm broken and shattered, and I have all this titanium in my body, and I'm highly medicated and all this kind of stuff. But that's what he said to me, and that's what I was going to do. Shortly after I had broken my back, I attended a youth winter camp, and I remember fasting for about 3 days at that camp. And I was asking the Lord, if there's something there for me at the camp, I'm so ready to receive. Now I know I'm there to serve the youth. But if you have something for me, I'd love to receive it. And man, it was a crazy experience. So when we were at this winter camp, I remember the pastor was just preaching, prophesying over these kids. And I had some stuff going on in my life as far as like rehabilitation, and I was in a little bit of legal trouble too.
Mm-hmm.
That all caught up to me after I had jumped out of the window. And the pastor was just speaking things only God knew in that room. I mean, no one else knew what was going on. And he had spoken to my life, and he said, you will be given a kingdom. You have a spirit of Joseph, and you will be given a kingdom. And it shook me really hard because if you know the story of Joseph, he was accused of rape. And me jumping out of the window, what really led to that moment, outside of my childhood and everything that stacked on top of that, was I was being accused of rape and attempted murder. And so in that moment, when he made that statement, and me knowing exactly who Joseph was and what he got accused of, it just shook my world. And so we fast forward to closer to the opening of Kingdom Fit. And I remember I was driving, and I asked the Lord, like, I know that I'm supposed to create this facility for people to come and to get to know you through fitness. What am I going to name it, Lord? And he took me back to that day when I had got prophesied over, and he goes, we've named it. And I was like, oh, Kingdom Fit, and the fit, faith and training. It all just all kind of worked together. So ultimately what I've created in my home, because that's where it started, this is very new, is basically a fitness church. It's a place where people can come. I've been in fitness I'm 41 now. I started, training when I was 15. My first gym job was at 16. So I've been in the fitness industry my whole life, and as a personal trainer for a big chunk of that. And as a personal trainer, what happens is you become your client's friend, their family, their therapist. You wear many hats within those sessions. And I realized that, we live in a time and a day where people just need more individual one-on-one attention. I believe that social media has really there's great qualities of social media. I mean, you and I would have never connected if it wasn't for that, but,
right.
But it also has that flip side to it, right? People are holding back from communicating, or are not doing it very well anymore. I think the internet world and social media can become this facade and this imaginary place, and it's really impacting the spirits and the emotions of people. And so I believe that to be able to get somebody in front of me and to really start to dig, and using my personal experience, everything that I've been delivered from, everything that I've been through, in fitness, let's get you in, we're going to work out, but let's dig a little bit deeper. Let's talk about what makes you depressed, or why you're overweight, or because there's always a connection, and it usually comes from childhood. And these were things that were exposed to me as I grew in Christ. And so the more he revealed about me, the more I understood on how to help other people. And what I found was that I had a lot of childhood issues, hence the drinking, the drugs, the depression, the suicidal thoughts, the actual committing to it. Like I realized that there was a lot of um, unresolved childhood issues. And when I started to really look at those things, and I started to look at my mom and look at my dad and understanding where those two came from and the things that were poured down to them, well, let me forgive them and give them the same grace that God would give me for the way that they raised me and the things that they did, because they didn't know better. Now, they may have never given their life to Christ or never tried to address those issues. But I was called to address those issues.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process of all, analyzing my childhood, I was able to really bestow forgiveness on my family. And then with that forgiveness, I was able to love my family for who they were. And that really started making significant changes in my life. It really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. And so, I'm not a pastor. I'm not a psychologist, a therapist by any means. I'm a man that's experienced a lot in life, and I have an amazing relationship with God. And I found a passion of fitness because fitness carried me through my rehabilitation process and taught me a lot about myself, just like Scripture did, and my relationship with God. And I just want to share those things with other people and try to draw that out of them. And, there's going to be those people that really don't need it. They're just here to work out. And that's cool too, man. You just want to help in any way you can. You just want to be Christ unto people. So that's pretty much what Kingdom Fit is. And this is just the inception of Kingdom Fit. Eventually I want to get into a facility where, you can still have that one-on-one time with people, but also do some, what they call group training and fitness, but, more like fellowship fitness. Like this is where we fellowship and have mobile fitness where, people will leave my facility to go train people at homes that can't leave their homes for whatever reason. To have Thanksgivings or Christmases or gift exchanges and toy drives and, take bike rides and hikes and, just do this stuff as a community and really build up people and build up communities. I truly believe that's what God has put on my heart, is to really pour that love into people and get people connecting again. And so that's kind of more of like what I see going on in the near future and the vision that the Lord has put on my heart for Kingdom Fit.
There's so much there, and it's really, and just hearing about the Kingdom Fit now is impressive. It's so important because the word teaches us that our body is a temple. We should be good stewards of our bodies. So there's that aspect. But for me, as I'm hearing you talk, I reflect back to some of these workout TV shows where they work people to exhaustion, and not as a torture method.
The Biggest Loser.
The Biggest Loser. The other shows where it's like, and I know that those shows have a lot of issues and that a lot of but the concept I'm trying to get to is just that when somebody gets to that point of exhaustion or fatigue, they no longer have the energy to put up the walls, and then there is your opportunity for ministries, because as you're working on their body and they lose that energy to keep up the walls, now there's time for the seeds to be planted and for some of those deep issues that you mentioned to come out and be discussed and a light brought to them, because the darkness cannot exist in the light. So I think that's a really big part of what your ministry is. Would you agree, or am I close?
Absolutely. So, what I found was, in the midst of exercise, people get, dopamine's it's flowing, right? You're just, you're feeling good, right? And when you feel good, you tend to open up about things. And sometimes exercise will do that, and complete exhaustion will do that for you too. Also building that trust factor within somebody, like, I'm not a guy that sits behind a chair and I have this major degree and I'm trying to analyze you. I'm actually genuinely trying to be a brother to you, and a friend and a mentor. This is what I'm genuinely trying to do. And that's what I want to establish is being able to have a relationship, so that you can talk about things, that it's a safe place, right? So you do have like the dopamine element of the peak of the fitness and feeling really good, and then you also have the breakdown where people are going to open up in different places.
Mm-hmm.
For some people will take fatigue, and some people will be like, man, I'm just flying high and I'm just going to tell you everything, right? So yeah, I would say that you're on track with that.
So let's go back a little bit and talk about your journey from you mentioned your so the challenges in childhood, and
Yeah.
walk us from that to your finding faith, and then just really discovering your faith when you're laying in the hospital after the suicide attempt.
So, very interesting how my faith really began. I was actually born to, so when I speak of my father, he's not my biological father. He's the man who raised me since I was 6 months old, but I call him dad. He's my dad. Um, so my mom, had me out of wedlock. She was actually encouraged to have an abortion, and my mom didn't have an abortion. 6 months later, she met my dad. My dad got her pregnant, had my sister, and when I was about 5 years old, I came home with a diploma from kindergarten, and on that day, I was told. So my last name was different. My last name was his last name, and his mom, my grandma, never received me as one of them because I wasn't their blood. And so
Mm-hmm.
my grandma instructed my father to change my last name. So then I was given my mom's maiden name. And I remember that conversation in kindergarten. And I remember walking down the street. And I didn't come from a religious family, man. Like my dad never talked about God. My mom, I know that she had a Catholic upbringing, but it wasn't something, with her upbringing, it was more fear based than it was relationship based. It was rules based. So she didn't really impose any of that stuff on us when we were young. So when I walked away from that situation, I just remember telling myself it's okay because God's my father. Everything's going to be all right. And, that had to have been the Holy Spirit, because I just don't know the fact that I even recollect it. That just has to come from the Lord. As time went on, when that seed is planted, when you're that young, the division begins, right? Like, oh,
Right.
well, he's not my real dad, and this is not my real sister. And then you start seeing the difference in how we get treated. And, the older I get, I start becoming rebellious. And I think I got to a point where there was so much fighting in my house, between my mom and my dad. There was heavy drug use, man. I would walk in and my parents would be chopping up drugs and, calling it one thing when it was something else. And, I was an 80s kid for the most part. I was born in 78, but, when I was growing up, domestic violence was much different than it is now. It's just like you beat up my mom, cops are called, you go to jail, uncle picks up dad's still drunk, and the fight continues, right? There's no spending the night in jail, sobering up, 52-week course, right? It just
Right.
wasn't like that when I was growing up. And so there was a lot of that went in my house, a lot of violence, a lot of fights, a lot of insecurities, a lot of drug use. And that just continued all the way till I got to high school. And then between 8th grade and high school, something changed, man. Like I just morphed. I went from kind of this lowly kid in middle school, just flying low, to almost becoming popular overnight. Like I got into high school, my looks changed, my attitude changed. Freshman year, some junior, senior, he was picking on me in medals class, and I think that I had so much hate and frustration built up inside of me. Like, man, I just took this dude out. I just right in class, But what that did was gave me a whole different level of respect from these upperclassmen. And I just realized, like, I'm a pretty tough dude. So 15, start smoking weed, start getting into drinking, start messing with, I think 15, 16, start messing with acid. And I really loved the game of baseball. Baseball was my sport. I grew up with it, loved it, adored it. I went out for the baseball team. Coach upset me. I threw a baseball at his car and got kicked off the team. I would cause problems in class. I would just mouth off. I'd go to class drunk. My buddies and I would go get high, and so my grades were bad. I wasn't doing anything. I pretty much dropped out of high school, as I never graduated high school. I was fortunate enough to meet some people that really cared about me. My best friend's family, they loved me like their own. But I had my own demons. I had my own issues. I had my own insecurities because I wanted a relationship with my mom and my dad. Even though my dad wasn't my biological dad, I just wanted a relationship with my dad. I wanted him to love me and respect me. And I wanted a good relationship with my sister. And I wanted that bond a brother and sister should have that we never had an opportunity to have, because it's just not what our parents tried to create between us. Mm-hmm. We ended up getting kicked out of the house. I mean, dude, when I was 16, 17 years old, my dad had left the house to move in with his girlfriend. My mom was like a meth junkie. She was hanging out with all these meth heads. And, we spent months without electricity in our house, without food. We'd have to go look for it. Like, my sister was doing meth and she was hanging with gangsters. And, this was the lifestyle that we lived. I was drinking and partying all the time. It was just chaotic. And when I was like 16 or 17 years old, my mom thought it would be a good idea for me to meet my biological father. And, I come home from school excited because my dad's gone, right? So I'm going to meet this other guy who's actually my biological father. I show up and he's smoking the glass pipe. So again, it's just like huge disappointment.
Right.
And that's my teenage years, huge disappointment, with the exception of my friend's family. But I was always seeking and yearning for something else. I powered through my 20s. My 20s are such a blur, man, because of all the drugs. Then I got addicted to cocaine. I mean, that was a rough one. I really, really enjoyed that drug. And then with that came more drinking. And eventually I met a young man that I worked with, and he started to talk to me about Jesus Christ. And, I was kind of in that place where, yo, man, like, that's cool. That may work for you, but that's just not for me. Like, you don't get who I am, where I come from, none of that stuff. Like, right. You don't know me like that. Right. I mean, that's typical amongst everyone that kind of rejects Jesus. And at that same time, like, I met a young woman, and that young woman, I knew right out the gate it was just a bad situation. And I'd got to a place in my life that these relationships, they almost had to get more chaotic, become more stimulating to me. It's kind of like being an alcoholic or a drug abuser. You kind of need more because you're trying to chase that first high type thing. Mm-hmm. And so I was getting in these gnarly relationships. So I get in this gnarly relationship with this young lady, and it gets physical, man. And we have to break up. And during our breakup, she starts going on Craigslist. So again, years ago on Craigslist, you can actually prostitute yourself on Craigslist. So she starts getting into the prostitution on Craigslist. Mm. And my buddy tells me all about it. Well, in that time that we were broken up, that same guy that was preaching Jesus to me invited me to a Bible study. And at this time, man, I'm an alcoholic. I'm a drug addict. I don't have a job. I don't have my license. I don't really have much going for me outside of the fact that I lift weights. That's all was going for me. So I took the invite, showed up to the Bible study, and received God that day. I received Jesus that day. And great experience. We were in an air-conditioned room. All of a sudden, I start shaking and sweating. It was supernatural what was going on. I knew it was something different. It was something very, very different. And, for a minute, I was good. But what happened? She walks back into my life.
So what you're
I
trying to say is just because you accepted the Lord at that moment, that didn't remove the bullseye. The enemy was still going to come after you.
well, no, it was no, he wanted me, like, I know he's not all knowing like the Lord, but
Hmm.
I think he had a feeling. I think
Right.
he just knew something, or at the end of the day, he comes to kill, steal, and destroy. So, I don't think he knew the plans that the Lord had for my life, but I'm sure there was a conversation that went down, and the
Hmm.
Lord's like, "He's mine." You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
that's mine. You can't have him. But I jumped back into this relationship with this young lady. So the agreement is this: you quit seeing all these guys, and we'll work it out. And so she's just like, well, I committed to this last trip to Hawaii. I got to go, but this will be the last one. And I agreed with it. And I said, okay, I
Mm.
mean, yeah. And I said, okay. So while she's over there, she gives me a ring. She's telling me all the things that he's doing to her, and sends me a picture of a black eye where, he had hit her. So he had raped her. He'd hit her.
Mm.
Yeah. He had done some stuff to her. And, when she came home, she came to pick me up at a friend's house. And, I had been partying, even though I had accepted the Lord, like, I still struggled with the drugs. I still struggled with the alcohol. I was still so young in my faith. And, she picks me up. We go to the liquor store, pick up some alcohol, head back to her spot. Well, while we're there, we get into this conversation, and, I'm full of torment at this point because we had got into a domestic situation. She had been escorting. I had just received the Lord, and I'd been drinking that night. Like, there was so much that was going on, and she wanted to get intimate, and I couldn't do it. And so I went downstairs. We argued. I went downstairs just to kind of shake it all off and rest. And
Hmm.
I kind of wake up to a banging on the door, and it's the police, and they're telling me to open up. And she comes down the stairs, and I ask her what happened. And she looks at me and she says, I called the cops and I told them that you raped me and that you tried to kill me. And in that moment, I was just completely devastated and totally betrayed. And, you know, um, in that, yeah,
Mm.
this for me was that perfect storm of events that could have happened because, I collectively, my childhood, the drug, alcohol abuse, the depression, all of it leading into this moment. And I'm just like, well, this is it. This is it. I'm done. And I looked at her and I said, I just can't do this anymore. And I ran headfirst out of a window with all intent to kill myself. I just wanted to break my neck and end it all. And I jumped headfirst out of a 3-story loft. And I busted through this closed window and clipped an awning on the way down. And it changed my fall and broke me into pieces. And, before you know it, I'm in the hospital and it's a 10-hour surgery. And I wake up after that surgery with tubes coming out of my neck, wires coming off my chest. I have a cast on one arm. I have an external
Mm.
fixator on another arm. I have a chest brace, back brace on. Yeah, I'm highly medicated, and the police show up and they're just like, you're under arrest for rape and attempted murder.
Wow.
And yeah. And then they shackled me to the bed on top of it, man. Um, like I was some kind of flight risk, right? And
Broken back, broken arms, all this.
yeah,
Somehow you're going to get out.
yeah.
I think you have been easy to catch at that point.
I wasn't going anywhere, man. I mean, I couldn't even sit up. I couldn't sit up in the bed without being in
Mm.
immense pain. And so I had 24-hour surveillance on me. So this one cop, he's just giving me a hard time. He's grilling me, and he's just like, Mr. Decker, you're such a bad guy. And I'm reading the reports. You did some really bad stuff. And, I start to break down because, first of all, these aren't things that I did. And I started to explain to him, I've done a lot of dumb stuff in my life. And I really had. I've done a lot of stupid stuff in my life. And I said, but that's just not one of those things. That's just not something I would do. And, all I did was cared about that girl. And maybe I did it the wrong way, but I did what I knew.
Mm.
And I start to break down crying because it is just so overwhelming,
Sure.
just to hear, and those are serious charges, man. And you hear stories of stuff like that, and then it like finally happens to you. You're like, I'm the guy that says, oh, that would never happen to me, right?
Right.
And it really happened to me. It really happened to me. And as he was, grilling me, the nurse comes in to calm me down because, all the blood pressure and the heart rate monitors are flying off the Richter. And as she's leaving, guess who walks in? The
Your
young lady.
mm.
Yeah, she
So
walks
your
in.
accuser comes in to see the damage that she's done, basically.
Yeah, I guess she came to bring a restraining order. That's what she came to do. But so she says. So that's what the cop told me. So the cop looks at her and he goes, is that who I think it is? And she had just got her hair done and she was wearing sunglasses. Like she was concealing her identity in a sense. And she shows up with her sister and he escorts her out. And, he comes to me and he's just like, for someone who'd been through all that, that just doesn't make sense. Um, of course I agree.
Mm-hmm.
And later that night, I'm laying there in bed. And if you've ever been in a hospital bed or in a hospital, like there's constant traffic, there's lights, the intercom's constantly going off. I'm hearing my breathing machine, the heart rate monitor, like everything. You're hearing all the chaos, and I'm laying in bed and I'm just talking to God, and I'm just like, Lord, what do we do? What are we going to do from here? And all of a sudden, man, I just get this overwhelming, peaceful sensation that just topples me from head to toe. And for a moment, things just stopped and everything got still and there was no pain and it was peaceful. And
Mm.
I hear this voice and he says, the charges will be dropped, your bills will be paid, and you will walk again. And I doze off, or I have a vision of me playing soccer, and which I wasn't a soccer player by any means, um, but I doze off and I wake up to the police and the chaos and the lights and the noises, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all the pain is back. Well, a few days goes by and the cops come in and they're like, we're dropping the charges.
Wow.
Yeah, so they dropped the charges. At that moment, I was allowed to have guests because I was no longer a inmate of the county, right?
Right.
So my mom shows up, and my mom's bawling her eyes out, and I know exactly what the doctors told her. I saw her out there talking to him, and she walks in, and what's going on, Mom? She's just like, nothing. What are they saying? Nothing. I'm like, and I know, and I'm like, what they say, Mom? They say you're never going to walk again. And she comes up to me and my mom and I had, my mom, she came from her childhood. She was the oldest of 5 and she was raped and she was beaten and she was kicked out of her house at a very young age. She had a child because she wanted to love something and she wanted something to love her back, man, because she just didn't have that. So here 29 years later, she's looking at her baby boy laying in bed, shattered, broken to pieces. And my mom says this, and I took this with them. It's going to sound crazy, but I took this as a mother's love. She looks at me and she says, I wish everything had ended for you that day. She just didn't, my mom didn't want to see me suffer, and she didn't want to suffer, and I received that as love, man. And shortly after that, the nurses walk in the room and they're just, Mr. Decker, we're going to try to get you to stand up. And I knew for a fact there was no standing up because I couldn't even sit up. But what I did know was that my mom was there. I had to give her hope. God had already spoke to me, and thoughts of Jesus, just flooded my mind. Thoughts of Isaiah 53, thoughts of the movie Passion of Christ, like all this overwhelmed me. And I just felt like I had to at least try. I had to at least try to get on my feet. And so the nurses tried to wrench me out of bed, and I squealed like a pig, man. And They had to inject me with pain medication, laid me down, and said, "Yeah, it ain't happening." Shortly after that, a surgeon walks in and says, "Hey, we're going to perform another surgery, see if we can get this." And a few days pass, whatever, and they perform another surgery. And even going into that surgery, you're signing documents, you're signing paperwork that say that there's an increase of certain nerve damage or paralysis, death. Like, you're reading it, but I had this overwhelming peace, like, it's going to be cool. And, I wake up and nurses come in a couple of days after my surgery and they get me on my feet, and I was able to drag my left foot. And I knew that I was going to be able to, I couldn't really vision it because of how jacked up I was, but I just knew I was going to be able to be active again, that I was going to be able to walk and run and do all those things. I didn't know how, but I just knew. And, that started my rehabilitation process right there. I ended up moving in with my mother. And in that process, I fell in love with my mom. I really got to see who she was, the demons that were chasing her. I was highly medicated when I stayed with my mom, and she would steal my medication and feed. She would trade me alcohol. So, but God showed me something about my mom. And I remember her coming home one day, man, and I broke down crying, telling my mom how much I love her, because I think I just realized all the torment she had been through. And here she is trying to take care of her adult son who attempted suicide, and over the next couple of years, I went from place to place, just trying to get a little bit better. And I finally ended up at my best friend's house. And after a final surgery, so the first two surgeries, after the second surgery, I was able to walk, but the third surgery, because my bones weren't fusing, I was collapsing, and they were concerned that long term that I was going to lose my ability to use max capacity of my lungs. And so they had to come in and basically try to fuse half my spine together, put rods and screws, and try to get me upright because I was leaning forward. And after that surgery, my best friend shows up at the hotel that I was at. I was taken to a hotel because I had nowhere to stay. I couldn't live with my mom because of the pain medication situation. And I stayed there, and slowly but surely, I started getting out, and I started moving, and I was reading my Bible, and I was praying every day, and I was asking the Lord to take me off the pain medications and all the drugs. And one day another buddy shows up, and he had just come to Christ himself. And he knew that I was a trainer previously. And he asked me to train him at the gym. Just train me, man. So we go to the gym, and I touch weights with him. And then all of a sudden I'm like, maybe I should just start lifting weights again. This feels great. And when I went in the hospital, I was 215 pounds. I mean, I look like a linebacker. In the first 3 weeks of my hospital stay, I dropped down to about 165 pounds. So I lost 50 pounds of weight within 3 weeks. And so I got really frail. So I went from this big muscular guy to this really frail guy. And when I started lifting weights again, I went from 165 all the way up to 185. So the next time I see my neurosurgeon, he's baffled. He has no idea what's going on. And I'm reading the word, and I'm lifting weights, and I'm trying to share Jesus with my Jewish doctor, man. He's, his stance is like, Jesus was a great guy. He was a good teacher, extraordinary man. But, that was his perspective. But, I was giving glory to Jesus, and I continued to lift weights. And then at one point, the Lord was basically like, well, you have to get off of disability. Like, I didn't put you back together for you to live off the government. So I'm like, oh, now I got to go get a job. And so now I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go get a job at a personal trainer at this brand new facility that just opened up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my story and my experiences, because at this point I'm getting stronger again, and I look fit, and I'm going to help people. That's what I'm going to do. Within the first couple weeks there, my manager introduced me to one of the sales girls. The sales girl was actually her roommate. She's just like, well, you need to go train with Rob, see what kind of trainer is, and give me feedback. I'm now married to that woman,
Wow.
Shortly after, I'm married to Alyssa. And shortly after her and I connected, we both lost our jobs there. And I ended up getting a better job, opening up a gym, just sales part of it, just selling an unopened gym. And we're going really great. But I still struggled with alcohol. It was just something I ran to. I wasn't running to God in certain situations. She wanted to move back home. We were living in Northern California. I'm from San Jose, and she's from Southern California in Torrance. And she wanted to go back home anyway. She wanted to move back down south. But I had this great job making great money. And things were going pretty good, but I was struggling with alcohol. And it was like the big problem in our relationship. And I knew it was going to be a big problem in our relationship, because our very first date, I bought a pitcher of beer. And she's just like, I don't want any of that. And I'm like, cool, because I'll drink it all. And, we're good, And she goes, I don't like that. And all these prayers of, God, take alcohol out of my life. In that moment, I'm like, oh, here it is. This is how you're going to get alcohol out of my life right here, through a woman. Okay, Lord, I got you. And unfortunately, the type of an event that took place wasn't ideal. But I ended up taking her car while she was at work, and I went to go help a friend move, and I went and bought a bottle of alcohol, and I was drinking, and I went to go pick her up. Well, I ended up crashing into someone's fence, running into their front yard. And God's grace is amazing, because I didn't hurt anybody. I didn't I didn't hurt myself. I didn't hurt anybody. But in that moment, I fled the scene of the crime, running into a creek, and I'm wet. It's cold, and here's the crazy part, man. I attempted suicide, and I broke my bones, and here I am, like almost off of all my medication. I'm working full time now. I got a beautiful young woman in my life. Like, my life is coming together again after what I did. I tried to take away God's creation, and he's just like, nah, I'm not having it, right? And here I am goofing off and still drinking and struggling with the alcohol. And I was under that house, and I pled with the Lord, man. I was just like, Lord, I deserve consequences. I deserve to lose my job. I deserve to go to jail. I deserve the legal troubles. I deserve to lose Alyssa. I deserve these things. But if you bail me out, Lord, if you bail me out, I will quit my job and move to Southern California with Alyssa. I will marry her, and I will quit drinking. If this is your will for my life, that's the commitment I make to you. I ended up getting a slap on the wrist when they found the alcohol in the car. Somehow it ended up in the trunk in a Tupperware box. It wasn't floating around in the car. So somehow I had the smarts or whatever to put it away. But the Lord, after that event, I never had the desire to drink again. And I prayed and prayed for God to deliver me from alcohol. And even though it was kind of like a really, intense event, he knew what it was once again going to take for me to quit. And so, from that point on, I was able to grow a lot more spiritually, because I wasn't drowning myself with any of that alcohol. And so when I look at my life in Northern California, where I had my last drink, I was born and raised there. I was born and raised in the Bay, and I drug and alcohol addicted and severe depression. And I was diagnosed with bipolar and ADHD and all this crazy stuff, right? Like all these ailments, right? And diseases, I guess. Some institutions would call that stuff. And I moved to Southern California, and then I got to start to grow as a man. And, I think a good woman will expose some stuff. A wife will expose some stuff and make you work on some things. And, that was the next chapter.
So that's a good point to step in. A new chapter, much like with each of us. God wasn't through writing the story of Rob Decker at that point, and there's a lot more to come. It's such an amazing story. I was really blessed to talk to Rob. Be sure to visit robdeckerspeaks.com to find out more about him, about his ministry. He's got a book out, as well as Kingdom F.I.T, which is his new training venture, using fitness as a way to reach people with the gospel. It's really exciting things. So be sure to visit robdeckerspeaks.com. The link and all that information is also in the show notes. Now, at the beginning of the show, we talked about Comedy Night at CPC on Friday, August 16th, 7:30 p.m. It's acting as a fundraiser for the outreach that is PureFest, Chicago's faith-based improv and sketch festival. We have, as of this recording, 7 confirmed acts coming into Chicagoland to be part of the second annual PureFest Christian Improv and Sketch Festival. We have my team's Well-Versed Comedy, as well as Matrimony. We also have Milwaukee's Alan Atwood coming down to represent Morningstar Productions Theater. Our headlining act is from Knoxville, Tennessee. That's Austin and Lip Presents. They're currently on tour throughout the South and Southeast. And they've even got a tour set up for Australia. So they're not only a national team, they're an international team. And we're just really blessed to have them come up. Now, this week we also announced the addition of 3 college teams. From Concordia University of Chicago, they have a drama ministry team called Decapolis. And then they have an improv team called the Unprofessionals. So both of them will be coming from Concordia University, Chicago. And then also coming from Tennessee, from Cleveland, Tennessee, the Kingdom Players from Lee University. So we're really excited to have 2 colleges coming up, 3 new teams, adding our total to 7 confirmed acts for PureFest. It's going to be a great afternoon. So please mark your calendars. If you're anywhere in the Chicago area, or you don't mind a trip to Chicago in late September, come on up September 28th for PureFest. It's Saturday, September 28th, starting at 1 p.m. at Crosspoint Church in Lockport, Illinois. Now, we're looking for folks that want a great afternoon of theater that will engage all ages, because it's for the family, it's for everybody, it's for men, women, children, and everything in between. It's going to be really a fun afternoon. So we're looking for you. If you want to buy tickets and make a contribution by buying a ticket, we'd love it. We're not going to turn anybody away. The suggested donation is $10 at the door for PureFest. Now, we are also looking for vendors. We have some vendor tables available. So if you're a business, we have vendor tables. Find out more and get your tickets at purefest.org. Or if you're a vendor that would like to set up a table, email me, dave@purefest.org. dave@purefest.org. The website is purefest.org for more. Now, we'll return with more of our interview with Rob Decker in just a moment on the Gifts of Glory podcast, where we celebrate and promote men and women of God that use their gifts, passions, desires, and talents to honor and glorify God.
Had a son, and then we just on our honeymoon we went to Colorado. We didn't want to do the Hawaii thing. We didn't want to do the go hang out on the beach for your honeymoon thing. We're fitness people. We're like, right, we're gonna go play in some mountains and hang out in some mud, and and that's what we're gonna do. So we chose Colorado, and we landed in Colorado Springs, fell madly in love with it, and the Lord pressed on my wife's heart that this is where you guys are going to move. So my wife committed to a month and a year. And by the time that happened, we had our first son. Our car was paid off. Most of our debt was paid off. When I met my wife, I was $40,000 in debt. Like, she went Dave Ramsey on it, man. My wife is brilliant. She this amazing woman. And so my wife's 12 years younger than me. So here I am, 33 years old when I met her with a busted back and child support and all sorts of crazy stuff, right? All this debt. And she wants to work on it with me because she believes with all of her heart that we're supposed to be together. And so within this few year period, we were able to clear all that, and we moved out to Colorado Springs. And I was able to get a job at corporate gym, build a clientele there, get to meet some really amazing people. So I've been in Colorado Springs for about less than a year. August 25th will be 1 year. And in that time, God has made some very amazing connections here. And, Kingdom Fit has an opportunity to really do some good in this community. What I learned being here, what we found to be a very beautiful place to move to, God had different plans. Like, yeah, it's a beautiful place, but I'm going to tell you now that it has a high suicide rate amongst teens. It has a very big drug problem. You have a lot of veterans in this area that are disabled and on pain medication, right? And those are the people that he wants me working with. And so within this short period of time, I was able to build a clientele and create Kingdom Fit out of my house. And, and we're 2 weeks away from having a daughter, man.
Wow. Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. So, God's done some amazing work. And here's the crazy part. Like, we could talk about this stuff for days because I got stories for days, man. I got, my life's a big, fat, juicy onion, and it just goes layer, layer. Like, it tastes a lot better, but it's, but yeah, there's just so much. And God's done amazing stuff. And now, he's using my gifts, to really help people, where in the past I had this gift. I could connect to people really well. I was a really great salesman my whole life. But I used it for my advantage. I used it for my good. I used it to survive in my little world. And those were gifts that God gave me, and I used them for me. And now those same gifts, God just anoints and just allows me to really connect with people and work with them and help them. And I only see amazing things in the upcoming years here in the Springs, and the community that we're going to grow and change and develop. And but that's all the Lord, man. I just show up and just try to be obedient to his wishes.
Yeah, dude, it's an incredible story. And as you're talking, I'm just in my mind, I'm trying to keep a tally of the times you can look at your life and see where God stepped in and saved your life. You mentioned earlier in your story that your mom had received some pressure to have an abortion.
Correct.
And there, right away, even before you take your first breath,
yes,
the Lord's already working to make sure that you make it. And then,
yes.
Throughout the drug abuse, or through the drugs, the abuse, everything you went through in your teen and college years, constantly God is there dispatching his angels to keep you because he has this purpose for you.
Yes.
And then, of course, the big one, jumping out the window and putting that awning in place so that you would land in a way where he could ground you, get you in a place where you and he could just do business for a few months, and then he could start to rebuild your life. It's an amazing story.
Well, thank you. It's his story. I just,
Mm-hmm.
I'm there to live it. And, I really believe that I had to see, breaking my back to me is the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because it really allowed me to develop a relationship with God. And, but even on a grander scale, like, I deal with people that have bad backs, right? I have hardware in my back. And so I can relate on that level. I'm not this, this kinesiology major out of a big school that played athletics and never got hurt. I'm this guy that's been broken down, and I believe that I was so part of the world, man. Like, I was going to clubs, VIP, getting free drugs. Like, God had to, like, physically allow me to be broken to get to my spirit, to break that even more and be like, you're counting on me, you're leaning on me, and we're doing this together. Like, he had to strip me from that world and build me from the inside out, because, I was a fitness guy, and I cared about the aesthetics and how I looked and the image, right? And it was empty. One of the most craziest things was all those people that called them your friends. You know how many of those guys showed up to the hospital? All those guys that we partied together, and and the people that you least likely thought would show up, man, showed up to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how that all works. But I believe God had to really allow me to be broken physically, to really work on my heart, man. And but I needed that experience, because I couldn't do what I do today with people if I didn't experience that. Because when people come to me with their stories and their past and their childhood, and their relationship with their parents or relationships with their spouses or, whatever it may be, I can easily connect to that experience and make it emotional, because a lot of times when people speak with me, like I relate. I like, I feel what they're feeling because I've felt it before. Um, and so and as crazy as it sounds, I'm very grateful for all the abuse, getting through the drugs and the alcohol, getting off all that stuff. All of it, man. And I do believe in the healing powers of God. I believe in deliverance. I believe in healing. I believe there's things that he does that no therapist or psychologist or doctor can do. And I know that he uses those people to help people. But he can just do so much more, man.
Mm.
And I know that. And I know that because I've been through it. So, but I did want to, touch, my mom has been sober for a couple years. I want to clear mom.
Yeah.
She's found the Lord, and I'm very grateful for that. Which means a lot to me because I love my mom with all my heart. My dad, I just recently lost my father to methamphetamine overdose. And what gets me through the loss of my father is just knowing that Jesus is so great that in my dad's final moments, Christ looked at my father and was just like, you ready to come home? You ready to accept me? You ready to come home? And that's what gives me peace. I prayed for my father a lot, and my hope is that Jesus showed up in his final breath and, just grabbed my father up in his arms and took him home, and my sister, she still struggles. When we lost our father, she went back to self-medicating. And so it still happens in my family. I just lost an uncle to drugs and alcohol, got into an accident. My mom's brother, my mom's husband died from drinking. And so a lot of this stuff, when it comes to drugs and alcohol and being delivered from it and it being so close to me and losing a lot of loved ones. I lost a buddy at 30. He's 37 years old, just had a baby. Alcohol and pain medication took him out, so this stuff is close to my heart. And that's why I'm on this mission to use fitness to get to the hearts of people that struggle with the drugs and the alcohol and the abuse. And because, man, I still live it, right? I still live it, seeing the things that are going on around me with the people that I'm close to.
Yeah, it's always something, like you said, the enemy's not nearly as powerful or as all-knowing as God, but he does know how to get you. And usually when he knows that he can't get you directly, he goes after the family. And so, definitely want to encourage all of our listeners that continue to pray for your family, pray for your sister, especially, that you would, find a peace that doesn't involve self-medication.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And only the mighty Lord can do that. I know that, he healed me of a lot of my childhood stuff, and he showed me certain things, and, I got it, that's why I do this or why I did that. And once I started addressing all that stuff, really there was no need for the self-medication. It's like, so revealing and forgiveness, like forgiving everybody, that I felt offended me or hurt me, or did me wrong, they're inflicted themselves, man. They're, and then that just kind of gets passed on to other people. And so, another goal of mine is I have a 2.5-year-old son that, I want to raise and I want to give him everything that I didn't have. I want to do things for him that weren't done for me. I'm not upset at my father for the things he didn't do. He just knew what he knew. And, just to be able to go throw a baseball with my kid, to be able to play catch with my kid, to encourage him to do those kind of things. Those things that I wanted from my father, now I get to do with my son, And that's important. Being a father and a husband is very important to me as well.
Outstanding. Now, do you have any physical, like, is there any residual effects from the life that you lived, including the injuries, or has that been completely healed? How are you doing physically?
Are you sure you don't want to ask me if like the metal detector goes off when I go to the airport? And that's usually everybody's go-to, man. So the answer is no. No. Here's the thing. You know, I don't have a natural spine anymore. Like that curve that everyone should have in their lower back is now flat for me. So it changes everything. So it changes the position of my hips, and it changes the position of my shoulders. But through constant training and rehabilitation, I've been able to correct that as best as it can get. And at 41 years old, I still play competitive softball. I play center field. So, I bat third in the lineup and I play center field. So not too shabby, right?
Right.
And so I can still perform on a pretty high level. As far as pain is concerned, if I go play a softball tournament, 5 games, I'm pretty trashed, but most people would be. If I lift too heavy, if I'm lifting too much without any recovery or self-care, my back will hurt, my hips will hurt. But I don't have to take pain medication. There's a reminder there. But I wouldn't say that I'm disabled or like I don't need to take medication. I'm sure there's people with healthy bodies that feel more pain than I do. So I wouldn't say there's too much, but I'm reminded that it's there. That it's there for sure. I mean, there's a lot of, I'm sure you saw the video, and if you go on the website, like you can pull up my actual x-rays. And so you'll see the amount of hardware that is in my spine. I mean, half of it is consumed with screws and rods and cages. It baffles x-ray technicians. It baffles doctors when they see my x-rays. Like, how is it that you move the way that you move without medication, with all this hardware in your body? And, that's just God. That's God. And I'm responsible for my temple. I think that's kind of how you started all this too, is we're talking about our temples. And, I'm just trying to honor my temple as much as I can. I mean, it's the only body that I have. And so taking good care of it is what's going to give me longevity. And at 41 years old and having a 2.5-year-old son that I want to play sports, and if that's what he chooses to do, like, I'm going to have to go out there and throw the ball with him and hit and run around with him. And, I'm going to partake in a lot of that stuff. And when my daughter gets here, I'm very similar stuff. And so I have to be healthy and move well and take care of myself. And so being a little bit older as a father and having such young kids with the type of aspirations that I have for them, I have to take really good care of my body.
Awesome. Well, Rob, I just can't say enough how impressed I am with your story, and I just hope that anybody that listens can see that no matter how bad you start, God can help you finish well. And even if you falter after you start off with the Lord, even if you accept the Lord and then you fall right back off the wagon, there's still hope there. And I think that the hope and how God can use all things, like in the story of Joseph, in your story, and he can use all things for the good of those who love him, who are called according to his purposes, that there's always hope as long as you can turn back to God and just trust him. Say, God, here's the broken pieces. You've got the glue. You can put it together better than I could ever imagine. So it's such a story of hope and of just amazing grace. And I'm just really I'm really blessed by the fact that you're able to share that and you're willing to share that on our podcast today.
Well, yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for having me, man. And thank you for responding to my request. And I love sharing my story, because to me, it's just sharing God. And, to me, it is the gospel. It's the gospel. It's his healing works and redemptive works and his love for his people. And, sometimes bad things happen to good people, and like the enemy's real, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, like I know that my God loves me a lot, and you know, just to trust in Him in those times that just seem like there's no hope. Like, you know what? There is,
Mm-hmm.
and so if I can leave anyone with anything, like there should be no such thing as hopelessness. As long as you have God, as long as you can, you know that there's a Father that loves you, and even in the midst of your pain and agony and trouble, like a lot of times that's just a season, you know, and you got to keep your eyes on Christ. I
Mm-hmm.
know that, like Peter on the water, like the moment my eyes come off of Him, I start drowning, you know, and I start getting caught by that storm. And you know, you just got to keep your eyes on the Lord. You just you have to, and like I said, even in the midst of tribulation, like you're going to walk away from tribulation and you're going to look back at it and like there was something to be learned in that tribulation. I think I know that you got to go, but you know, when I look at the abilities of God and how He heals people, I know that moment when I hit the ground and I broke my back, that the mighty Lord could have put His hand on me and just healed everything. Nothing's broken, everything's good, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there was so much work that had to be done on me that I had to walk through this painful process of sleepless nights and crying and struggling and rehabilitation. And, you know, you know, I look back on it, it was all part of the ride, man. It was all part of
Mm-hmm.
the journey, and it was all part of the teaching process. I just hope that most people aren't as stubborn as I am. I mean, okay, so if I'm going to leave you with anything, just don't be as stubborn as Rob Decker. Please, just don't. It's, I mean, it's turned out okay. It's, you know, it's not yeah. So, yeah.
Very good. Well, Rob, one of the things that I do on the podcast is I end it with what I call the interrogation. I come up with 7 quick questions
Oh,
just to kind of get your quick first response. Most of them are pretty lighthearted. Some might be challenging, but we just want
okay.
to see, see what the quick answer might be. So
Okay.
the first question on the interrogation is, what's your favorite movie of all time?
Oh, Shawshank Redemption.
Nice. What's the hardest exercise that you try to teach and that you enjoy doing?
The hardest that I actually try to teach, I think just teaching a deadlift is most people don't move well enough to execute it properly, and it's the hex bar deadlift is hands down my favorite movement because it's very functional, it's practical. We use that movement in everyday life, and so getting people to commit to it and do it properly is a challenge because most people don't have the movement in their hips to do it properly.
Nice. All right, getting serious here. Looking back, what's your biggest regret?
Biggest regret, um, man, dude. You know, it's tough. I don't know if I have any regrets. Um, you know, I guess I regret not. Um, Man, that's tough, bro. You know what? I regret the way I treated some people in life. Um, I treated really good people poorly when they were only trying to do what's best for me. So that's a regret.
All right.
Does that
And
count? Is that
yeah,
fair?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I didn't
Okay.
want to. I wanted to let it sit for just a second because that's a pretty deep question there. So next question, number 4 is. I know that you said that you had a vision while you're in the hospital playing soccer, and you said baseball is
Oh,
your sport. What's your favorite sport now to play?
oh, softball. So, you
Softball.
know, I still play competitive softball. Um, on that vision, though, really quick, I didn't play soccer, but turns out my wife was a soccer player, and she's pretty awesome, by the way. Just want to give you the heads up there. I watched her score 3 goals on the dudes, which was pretty impressive. And in that moment, I knew I had to make babies with that woman. So I'm like, we're going to have some athletic children. But I think too, in that vision, because I never expressed what God was showing me in that vision, was that I was going to be extremely active again. So, I think, it was a multifaceted vision, but I had to touch on that because I didn't really get to expand on that.
Sure. So it is prophetic in that you're going to be active, but you're also going to have soccer in your life because of who your wife is.
Correct.
Very nice.
All right.
All right. Question number 5 is your biggest fear right now.
Well, my biggest fear is not trusting in God and his process and his ways. So my biggest fear is like just me getting in the way of me. That's my biggest fear. Like when I'm focused on him, I know everything is just going to be amazing. But my biggest fear is that I get in the way of all that stuff.
So if you have to do something, if you had to do anything other than fitness to make a living and support your family, what would you want to do?
I would probably, if it had to be something, I would have to work with people on some level. I do speak sometimes, and I hate speaking with a passion in front of large crowds of people. But if my story changed people and I could make a living off of it, I would probably do that.
Perfect.
I think.
All right. Final question. Who would you most like to work with in the world of fitness and try to glean different techniques and things from?
Wow, that's a pretty man. I don't know if there's anyone in fitness that I truly look up to. I mean, I always respected Kobe Bryant's work ethic, his mindset toward all that stuff. I mean, I think Michael Jordan had a similar mindset. As far as like my fitness industry, if you could bring Jack LaLanne back, I'd hang out with that guy.
Nice.
He lived a very long time, and he did some things that most humans would never do.
Right.
And he did that at old age, and man, he could sure juice some vegetables, man. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think in the fitness industry, it would probably be him, the second coming of Jack LaLanne. I don't know if that's blasphemous on some level. Or
well, if he knew the Lord, he'll return when Christ returns. So
for sure. So.
Well, Rob, that concludes the interrogation, and I really, again, just appreciate your testimony, your story, and just the story of redemption, the story of hope, the story of how God can work with anything as long as you give it to him and let him pick up the broken pieces. And it's a story that needs to be told, and I'm glad that we're able to tell it on my podcast, and just continue to encourage you to share it with any opportunity that you can.
Oh, and I will. And I mean, if you connect with anyone where you feel like it will be beneficial to them, send them my way, and I'll be more than happy to share with them as well. So
awesome. Well, Rob Decker of robdeckerspeaks.com. And I will give you our final word as we wrap up. Anything you want to share with our audience on your way out?
I think I did a whole lot of talking. I think I'm pretty good. So, so yeah, I think I'm good.
All right, very good. Well, Rob Decker, thank you so much for joining us on the Gifts of Glory podcast. Wish you guys all the best, and congratulations on the new baby girl coming.
Thanks, my brother, man. I really appreciate you, and thank you again so much.
So that was our interview with Rob Decker. Find him at robdeckerspeaks.com. That's all one word, robdeckerspeaks.com. He's available to share his testimony with your church, your youth groups. He's also available if you are a podcaster or a radio host that happen to listen to our podcast. He is also available to speak on your show as well. He would love to continue to tell his testimony as he heard throughout the interview there. And also be sure to check out, especially if you're in the Colorado Springs area, he's ready to help you get fit physically and spiritually with Kingdom F.I.T. Kingdom F.I.T, F-I-T meaning faith in training. Just really thankful to have Rob on this week. And we'll be back next week with another great guest as we continue the Gifts of Glory podcast, where we celebrate and promote men and women of God that use their gifts, passions, desires, and talents to honor and glorify God. Talk to you next time.